Hey there, Shauna from Skip Blast here, and today I want to talk to you about a question that I tend to get quite a lot from people who are building their own sites. And that question is, how do I know when I should sell my site? So let me begin by saying that whenever you're starting a new site, I think it's really beneficial for you to kind of sit down and come up with like a little goals list of, how long you think you want to hold the site, how much you want to end up making from it before you sell it, and maybe even a time period of like, okay, if I haven't made X by this date, then I'm selling it regardless. Because sometimes you don't want to hold on to sites for too long because, maybe if you're struggling with it or you just get tired of working on it and things like that. So that's why I think you need to come up with those things whenever you're starting a new site. For me personally, what I like to do is come up with both a time frame and an average monthly income amount. So I might say, I want to sell this site within 2 years or when I have an average income of, say, $1,000. That way, whenever I reach one of those goals, I can kind of take the time to evaluate and say, okay, am I ready to sell this now? Do I want to wait, kind of see what happens? Because, things change. Maybe you decide you want to hold on to that site a little longer. Maybe you decide you're ready to sell a little sooner. So kind of, know that you have that kind of wiggle room, but you could still go ahead and set those goals so that you can kind of check up on where you are. So with those things in mind, I think what your real focus should be is basically, when is the ideal time for me to sell this site? And the answer to that is going to change from one site to the next. The reason you need to know the ideal time to sell your site is because what you're really trying to accomplish here is getting the highest possible return on selling this site. And not only that, but you want to make sure that you list this site for sale at a time when it will move the fastest off of that marketplace. Because you don't want to be holding on to a site too long because it's just like sitting, week after week on that marketplace, right? And the reason you don't want that to happen is that, inevitably there are going to be people who are watching those listings just looking for the sites that aren't moving so they can send you a lowball offer. And, if that happens, you'll basically end up doing a fire sale on your site, and you don't want to be put in that position. And that brings us to the next question that you need to answer. What makes my site attractive to buyers? The good news is that you can just kind of talk about this in generalities, right? Without fail, a site that has an upward trajectory for both traffic and revenue, that's going to be what's most attractive to buyers. Those are the sites that are going to get the highest multiple, and they're going to move off of those marketplaces the quickest. And that is what you want to have. This is when your site is most valuable to both you and any potential buyers. But, obviously that means a site that's kind of on a downward trajectory, like maybe it got hit by an algorithm update or something like that. You're not going to get the best multiple for that. You're not going to have a lot of interest. That doesn't mean you can't sell, one of your sites if that happens to it. Just know that if you do, it may take you quite a while. And when you do sell it, it's going to be at a much, much lower multiple than you're going to expect. If you've got a site that's pretty flat in terms of traffic and revenue, you might be thinking that that's going to be problematic. But the good news with a site that's flat is it does show stability. What I like to do if I have a site that's like this is I like to stop working on it for 6 months just to see if it will continue to stay at the same level of both traffic and revenue. And if that happens, then when you go to sell that site, you can kind of spin it like, oh, I stopped working on it and things just kind of stabilize where they were. And while that doesn't work every time when you're trying to sell your site, some buyers will hear that and they'll go, oh, well, if I just give it some fresh link, give it some fresh content, then I can get this back on an upward trend. And that will help you move a site like that much faster. The thing is, though, with a site that's pretty stable is you still usually get that, a pretty good multiple for that. Usually get whatever the average is, in that time period. Like right now, that would be 35x. And that's not a terrible multiple at all. So do know that you can sell a site that is pretty flat like that. Good multiple, but it may take you a little longer compared to a site that's on an upward trend. The next thing that you're going to want to think about when it comes to selling your site is the time of year. It seems like pretty much every site owner tries to sell their sites in January because they've all had, a big holiday season, a lot of revenue coming in November and December. But the thing is that buyers are pretty savvy, so they recognize what's going on here, right? So they don't want to be paying an inflated price for your site just because the last 2 months went really well. So you're going to get a lot more negotiations. Your site's probably going to end up in the marketplace a little longer. So I never advise people to sell their sites in January. Personally, what I like to do when I'm ready to sell a site is to sell it right before that peak season hits. Now, for most sites, that peak season is going to be the holidays, so November and December. So in that instance, I would target maybe October for selling a site. For seasonal sites, though, you're going to have some variation there. I know I've mentioned in the past that I've sold more than one site in the paddleboard niche. And for that particular niche, it was always the summer months that brought in the most revenue for me. So when I sold each of those sites, I tried to time it so that it was right before that hot season so that buyers would be super hungry to buy up the site and kind of capitalize on all of that revenue coming in. Now, you may approach selling a site with a specific dollar amount in mind. So, I don't know, let's say you want to sell a site for $75,000, right? But you may not know what that actually means for you. Like, what do I have to do to be able to sell my site for $75,000, right? So most of the time, whenever you're going to sell a site, it's that valuation that you get is going to be based on the average profit of the last 12 months of that site's life. Now, there are going to be some instances where maybe you'll get last 6 months, last 9 months. That tends to happen when sites have had kind of like a crazy growth spurt, so that a 12-month kind of average would not be fair to you, when you're going to sell it. But most of the time, you're probably going to get that 12 months average. Do note that that average is based on profit and not, income. So you're going to have to basically deduct any expenses that you have for things like, paying to build backlinks, things like that. However, content, it's never considered an expense, at least not most of the time. The major brokers, I don't count it as an expense. Instead, that's considered an investment. Now, what I like to do if I'm spending money on a site that's not content is a good 6 months before I'm ready to sell, I kind of wrap up all of my spending that I possibly can to kind of help that average, income number. Now, it's even better if you can actually front load a lot of those expenses so they don't get counted at all, but I know you can't always do that. So once you've done all your math and you have that average monthly profit number, you can kind of do some rough calculations to determine how much your site would actually list for. So you can see how close you were to that $75,000 number. Currently, the average multiple you're probably going to end up with is somewhere between 33 and 35x. So you would just multiply whatever that average monthly profit number is by one of those numbers, 33 to 35x. Now, if you're like me, you don't really want to sit down and do all that math right now. Empire Flippers actually has a really great tool on their website where you can kind of input the details about your site and get a number of what it might be worth in the marketplace. This tends to be pretty accurate, I find, for what you get regardless of where you're selling the site. So I highly recommend checking that tool out. It is free. I'll just put a link down below if you want to check it out right now and see what your site's worth. That's pretty much the basics, I think, that you need to know of when you should sell your site. Remember, ideally, you want to sell that site when it is worth the most amount of money, which is going to be traffic on an upward trend and the site's revenue on an upward trend. I hope that helps you make a better decision on when you should sell your site. If you enjoyed this video, then go ahead and leave me a comment below, like the video, or subscribe to my channel. This lets me know if I should create more videos like this to help you on your site building journey. Thanks for watching.